What's the most unethical thing you've experienced in your career? I'll never forget this case of a 98-year-old patient who had a living will written when he was in his late 80s, stating that he would never want to be artificially kept alive with feeding tubes or a respirator. Flash forward to present. His dementia has progressed to the point where he is nonverbal and barely moves. His daughter has put a feeding tube in him and has insisted he get intubated for his pneumonia respiratory failure. I find his living will and am outraged, trying to advocate for this man who can no longer speak, who once had wishes that he wrote down that are no longer being recognized. The daughter pushes for us to do everything because she knows him better and thinks his living will is not what he really wanted, and most doctors thus far had allowed her to drive the ship. It's a case that still bothers me every time I dwell on it. I found out that one employer I worked for had been selling a product which didn't actually work, a product that his customers, who were small businesses, relied on to back up their data in the event of data loss. The employer had been selling this product which didn't work for 10 years. Over the last couple of years, he stopped selling it directly and started selling it as a service via computer stores all throughout the state, to the point where a majority of such stores selling this service in the state were all selling the same backend, but branded with the store's logo and name, which meant that when a customer business had all their data disappear, which they only found out about when they needed to restore something after a disaster, they often fired their local computer store as a backup provider and went down the street to the next computer store in their backup service, which used exactly the same failure-prone backend. By the time I left, they had a couple of thousand customers, the vast majority of whom never knew they were actually using this particular service, and had a corresponding trail of failures and disasters of other people's businesses. Of course, they're still operating today. Please name and shame this company. Had a sales guy ask me to lie to a client. When I said no, he asked another tech on the same call to lie to the client instead. Both of us declined and immediately went to our supervisors with the incident. Username checks out. Seems like this always happens in IT. Maybe because so many people don't understand it, it's easy to get away with. Got fired for conspiracy for bringing management concerns to the general manager. Said manager got fired a month later for stealing money by cheating payroll. I don't want to say I told you, but B. I'm a thafakin told you so. Worked customer service for an online retailer who would send people generic versions of things when the genuine stuff was unavailable. What's freaked up is they still charge the genuine price, so customers would call up infuriated and yelling at us reps for dumb crap corporate was doing. What's freaked up is they still charge the genuine price, so customers would call up infuriated and yelling at us reps for dumb crap corporate was doing. FTFY was hilarious yo. I work for a company that does accident reconstruction simulations using 3D software, specializing in the mining industry, and in a lot of cases the mines change the story of what happened to blame the victims. They are the paying customers, so we just do and animate whatever they want us to, and they use this in their reports of what happened. Sounds like insurance fraud. Not you guys, but the ones contracting you. Sending out windows that we knew would have to be replaced more than likely leak because they did not meet quality standards. The justification: it's better to get the window to them on time and replace it later than to replace it now and be late on the order. The window packages my company sold were specifically for multi-million-dollar homes, and on more than one occasion they had to cover damages from poor products, costing them upwards of $500,000. My parents are moving to a $400K house, and this is Mississippi. They tried to do so much unethical crap. Unfortunately for them, my dad is a 20-year veteran real estate broker and licensed contractor. He found so much crap: bold, shoddy work, bad concrete, repeated lack of fidelity to the plans, and obstruction at every turn. He's taught me to be very wary of shite contractors. I'm in college for biology and ran a research group for forensic entomology with intention to publish a paper. We noticed some of our numbers on maggot length were kind of funny in our group Excel, and we double checked who'd been assigned those maggots to measure. Asked the guy who did them and he said, "Oh, I just measured one and guessed on the rest cause they looked about the same." Kevin, that's academic fraud. Had to redo 2 weeks worth of work. What an ass Kevin is in all scenarios on Reddit. I'd make him measure any and all maggots from now on. At one of my prior places of work, a black guy came in for an interview. The interview went great and my boss and the interviewee seemed to get along great. After the guy left, my boss threw the guy's application and resume in the garbage and said, "I don't want no NR working here." Luckily that happened to be last week of work there. I have dealt with it all. The worst is when I was told to fudge some numbers for a report that was going to be public. I refused and resigned. I told HR about it in the exit interview. I was in a hard place at work. If I reported it then I was going to catch heck. If I did it then my personal integrity went out the window. I don't want to work for any company that does anything that requires me to jeopardize my integrity or personal reputation. In my years of experience it's better to find another job. If you blow the whistle and stay at the company there are repercussions no matter how much they assure you that you will be protected. I hear on that. Chain Ketchup. Manager only cared about his bonuses. We had critters kicking off left and right. I called the anonymous hotline on my cell phone one night. The very next day I was called into the office and read the riot act and banished to another store where he could go on his merry animal killing ways. Throwaway. I teach 3rd grade. The principal's son is in my class. Before the year started, the principal finagled all of the class lists so her son's friends would be with him in my class. These kids were not supposed to be together at all. Then she would show her son the class lists to make sure that he was okay with the list. There was one kid he really wanted in my class with him he was friends with. The principal contacted his mother and told her to request me so they could be together. Ended up not working out after the 2nd grade teacher said absolutely not. Good, if you put the brat's posse with him, you know what was gonna happen. Cheating, disruptions, all sorts of shenanigans. I'm a physicist. A group of people, including myself, were in the process of publishing a paper which, in part, refuted the conclusions in a previous paper of a very high-ranking scientist at the lab we work at. He caught wind of this. How? Because I innocently called him up and asked him for a digital copy of the, already published, data that he had used. In passing, I mentioned the thrust of the paper we were preparing. I didn't get the data. He very matter-of-factly told me that if we published our conclusion, he would make sure none of us ever received a single dime of funding ever again. We removed that part of the paper. That guy is not a scientist. Co-workers who have worked a double, going 16 hours without changing a patient simply because they're weird or they're mean. It doesn't matter. That is subjecting them to infection, discomfort, and humiliation, at the very least, for not being changed into new briefs and clothes when they've soiled themselves. I was given housing on company property as part of my compensation package. When I gave notice of my resignation, they decided that I needed to vacate my apartment immediately, as in, pack up as much of your stuff as possible at 9 PM, get out now, and come get the rest later. This was totally unexpected because I'd given a lot to this company and, the real kicker, it was a non-profit dedicated to ending homelessness. I got a hotel that night and was hoping to work something out with them until I could find a new place to live, but they wouldn't budge. When I said I would be hiring an attorney, they said they'd start spreading rumors about both me and my SO, who was affiliate with our organization, and they'd make sure that so much damage was done that neither of us would be able to show our faces in the community again. At that point, I was scheduled to get both my regular paycheck and biannual performance bonus the next week. Once my unused PTO was calculated in, I was due over $10,000, which I needed because I had just given up my job without the 30 days I thought I was going to have to find a new job and was made unexpectedly homeless. They ended up taking 4 months to pay me, deliberately delaying it for no good reason and not returning my calls. I think they would have delayed it longer, but I started calling their grant makers one by one and exposing their behavior. It was all I could do. At that point, my savings were all but gone and I could barely meet my basic needs, let alone hire an attorney. No one would take my case pro bono or collect money upon collection. This is just the icing on their unethical cake. 2. There was a lot I saw in my time there, but I had my head in the sand. What hypocritical buttholes. Please tell me they've gone out of business. I have worked for 8 years in my previous job. I can safely say that they trusted me to listen and participate with their meetings and all, even though I am not in any position. My employer asked me once to look for new employees, and I recommended my friend. I didn't told them that he's a good friend of mine. After passing with flying colors in the interview, my employer pulled me on the side and said he's more than qualified and I really like him to be part of the team, but he's black. My friend didn't end up getting the job and handed in my resignation letter day after. We're in Canada BTW. Christ on a crutch, in this day and age, I can only shake my head. My company was hired to, among other things, write a report about whether or not a government building's new windows and roof are up to code. Not sure why they wouldn't be or why it wasn't checked before they installed them. Turns out the windows weren't. I noted it in my report. The PM from the architect of the Capitol cornered me one day to talk about the report. He said the windows were a big deal and asked me to change the report. I refused. I wonder what the response would have been if you'd added to the report that the PM had approached you and requested that you lie on it. Was asked to write a procedure as a response to a client's complaints to show them that we had addressed the issue. The problem? We knew what the issue was and lied about the origin, kinda like claiming it's because we used sugar from Costa Rica instead of from Brazil, when the problem was actually because our cooker stopped working. But we couldn't tell them that because we had promised everything would be cooked over a bonfire sort of thing. The really unethical part? The fix we claimed to have implemented was chemically and physically impossible. I refused to put my name to it. Told them I'd write it up, but someone else would have to sign it, or so help me. I'm blowing the whistle and practically losing them all their contracts with this major client. Think on the lines of losing Samsung as a client etc. The cherry on the cake? After I was ridiculed and subject to veiled threats, they told me to go ahead. One of them would sign it. Love working here. Maybe it's the beer tour I just did, but this feels like beer brewing. Video game journalist. Because most of us are freelance, we regularly file invoices with the hope that a publication will follow through on our contracts and pay on time. This does not always happen. One of my favorite publications let go freelancers recently, and I'm still owed $300 plus dating as far back as September. My contract states payment must arrive 30 days after filing an invoice. It's been 120 and 90 days between my two invoices. It's not just wrong to writers, it's breaking our contracts. Seriously messed up priorities there. If you have contracts and writing, take it to small claims. In most cases, you don't even need a lawyer for it, and most small claims courts are fairly efficient at enforcing clear contracts. I did freelance software development for a few years, and as much as it sucks to sue a client, sometimes it is necessary. I worked at a bike shop as a mechanic when I was 17, and sometimes when people my boss didn't like came in to have their bikes repaired, he would tell me to leave certain problems alone, generally just do a poor job on their bike. I was in high school and needed my job, so I would just fix and tighten things up anyways when he wasn't looking, but like, people could get really hurt when their front wheel comes off on a 40-mile ride when they're riding along traffic. As another mechanic, he totally crossed a line. I mean, it's one thing to not do as good of a job on a prick's bike, like maybe not spending as much time on the shifting as it could use, but another thing entirely to leave it actually dangerous. Said by the principal of a previous school I worked at, I know this student has only handed in one piece of work the whole year and she failed that, but just give her a passing mark overall for that subject so she can graduate. It'll make our graduation figures look better. This was said at a whole staff meeting. Thankfully I didn't teach the student in question and didn't have to follow this directive. I'm not sure if her actual subject teacher did though. This is why little Johnny can't effing read and he's graduating high school in May. My boss was addicted to pain pills but knew our company policy was to have random drug testing done, not wanting to get fired, but not wanting to cheat on his wife. He would have one of the younger, more fit guys in the office drive to corporate headquarters over an hour away to sleep with the HR rep in exchange for her reporting that his drug test came back clean. This was the most egregious of offenses, but there were plenty more. I have since moved on from that company. Okay, this is the worst yet. Pimping out employees to cover drug use is just sheesh. Pimping out employees for any reason is balls. Unless you're running a brothel, I guess. Here's one for the IT field. I worked at a company that was offering DDoS mitigation solution. I was designing the GUI that would be set up on their proprietary router. It took a few months of working there to clue in that the whole thing was a sham. Basically, my boss was cashing in on the scare that many businesses had of losing their online presence and took in loads of money. Basically, the machine would monitor incoming traffic and it said it would filter out DDoS attacker automatically. What it did was watch the traffic and randomly say it blocked attacks. All smoke and mirrors. I ended up leaving shortly after taking a panic attack from the boss physically assaulting another coworker. The last 2 tours I ever did as a musician, our guitarist was a money-grubbing prick. We did 6 weeks in Europe, and when I was told about the gig he expected us each to earn $300 WK, which was quite good for this band honestly. It turned into $500 for the entire tour, plus our €10 per diems every day. Oh, and then it turned into I was the only member of the band he couldn't afford to pay. Then he duped me into paying, as usual, out of pocket to fly out to NYC to practice for the next tour, which was 10 days in the US and Canada and a week in Japan, saying he'd pay me back everything he owed me on the road. Also, he had some unspoken beef with me the last 3 weeks in Europe and avoided communicating with me almost entirely between the end of it and the beginning of the next tour. Turns out he never intended on paying me back at all. As we get to 7 days in and it starts getting heated, I finally approach him in person to square it away, and he tells me he's not interested in talking to me in person and he'll just email me instead. I tell him either pay me what you owe me in full after the show tonight, or I'm flying home tomorrow. He made the excuse that the band doesn't have any money, so fly home I did, and I've stopped doing music ever since. People have been killed over less. Surprised this didn't get more heated. Being told which percentage of my students should earn as B's, etc. Apparently student performance is not a factor in the grade they receive. Also, no student should ever fail. Disagreed. Students earn their grade and if it's an F, so be it. An F isn't a punishment. An F is a safety mechanism to keep kids from getting in over their heads. I had a boss that hired a company to do some development work. The project was around 10 months. Our company was struggling financially and refused to pay them for the work on time. Payment terms were 30 days. We had some bills that were over 6 months late. His response when I told him we were violating our contract and he said we are not, we're going to pay them eventually, just whenever I feel like it. This was a normal occurrence and why I couldn't keep a development firm around. Sounds like a boss I had a few years ago. Sometimes he would order stuff without calculating the cost. Then when the bill came he would just say this is too expensive. There's no way I'm paying that, and then he would just rip it up and pretend it didn't exist. I was told I couldn't apply for the supervisor position because I'm too attractive and people wouldn't take me seriously. I guess that's flattering in some sort of fricked up way. Well, supervisor, I can see why you were such a perfect fit for this position then. Can't really say it was a career. It worked for a man who wouldn't hire a young woman because she's 23. She might have a baby in the next 5 years. I don't want to deal with maternity leave. He also wrote his children into the books as cleaners so they would meet work requirements to qualify for government payments. I cleaned that building every day and never qualified for benefits. He drove a BMW. Also, once he asked me why I had walked down a different street to work, apparently watching me through the window. I told him I'd visited my boyfriend the night before. He was silent for a moment or two then said, you know you're going to heck, right? I was too young and dumb to realize just how unethical it was. If I had my time again I'd report him for fraud. I never got my dang government benefits. The not hiring a young woman in case she gets pregnant thing is very common apparently. I know someone who worked on various universities and people higher up always spoke about young women being a risky hire. The new manager, who took over my place of work after literally everyone in the bar got fired for thousands of dollars in liquor and beer missing, told me to pour the really cheap liquor into the top shelf bottles. He said it was to save money. I refused as this kind of action can actually send you to prison in Texas. He hated me after that and wrote me up for the dumbest reasons. I had been with the company for years and trained every single person including the new manager. He finally fired me and replaced me with a girl who literally didn't know the difference between lemons and limes. As a bartender, this is pretty important. For a functioning human in a first world country, I'd say it's pretty basic knowledge. That's astounding. Blackjack dealer. Co-worker fails a drug test hard. Wasn't a bad employee, just really likes the hard stuff. Should have been fired on the spot. Got 3-4 day suspension. Told he would be randomly tested for 6 months. Wasn't. Security officer starts a fight with a guest over a personal beef. Clearly swung first. Surveillance officer backs him, says the guest was the aggressor. Maintenance guy is creeping on a bartender's girl. Cocktail server. Bartender's buddy is head of maintenance. Has the guy fired for unauthorized overtime. The graveyard cook at our 24-hour place gives me free meals every time I go in there cause we're friends and fricks with people's food he doesn't like. I could go on. It never ends with this place. Dang dude. Time to move on before you mess up and become the one to get axed because you wore the wrong color shoes. Here, take these made in USA stickers and cover up all the made in Taiwan, China etc. stickers before we send this stuff out. Everyone refused to be the one to do that. Corporate gave up on it. I worked the warehouse at a food processing plant that was also supposedly kosher. I came in one day and the warehouse was half empty. So I asked what was going on. I was told that the rabbis were in checking the facility and all non-kosher ingredients had been moved to our off-site warehouse. I'm not even Jewish and this makes me super angry. I was a warehouse man in a pesticide warehouse, and when the pesticide season came, spring, we sometimes had to work 6 days a week, daily 12 hours. It was against the law in Hungary. You can only work 5 days a week, and you can only work twice for 12 hours a week. But we didn't dare to do anything because we wanted to keep our jobs. Those were some freaking rough weeks, but we got some very freaking good payment for it. Honestly, the backstabbing that happens in almost every job I've ever been in, you can argue if it's ethical or just petty, but to me it's genuinely dishonest. Examples I've heard experienced. 2 assistant directors on my team. They were friendly up front. But the older one was always really quick to try and blame the other for anything she personally did wrong. I got placed as a team lead. Within 5 minutes people on the team started telling the manager I was insulting and controlling team members. I went to the bathroom after being assigned and came back to hear this. For the record, this happened whenever anyone got assigned team lead except for 2 specific younger women on the team. I wonder why that was. You do this project, you'll get promoted. Did the project. Hey, we're promoting the other guy. Why? Previous manager told us to. Previous manager told me I would get promoted if I did this project. Well, we're not previous manager. So why did you promote the other guy? Previous manager told us to. Manager tells me I've been cleared to take a day off at a retail job I had and I'm all set. Fuck it. It was Gap. Crap stores. Crap clothes. I take the day off. Come back on my next shift. Another of the 8 freaking managers says you didn't show up to your previous shift. Yay. I asked for it off and the manager cleared it. Well, she didn't tell me so now you're written up. The frick I am. Not my fault she didn't tell you. Talk to her. I don't need to. You're getting a written warning. I never signed it. I speak Spanish. I was stock boy for the Gap on some shifts. Some co-worker yelled and called someone something derogatory in Spanish. Manager comes to the back where I'm working and tells me what happened. Blames me. It wasn't me. I've been here the whole time doing stock. Well, you know Spanish. And you know makeup. What's that supposed to mean? They wrote me up and tried to have me sign. Also tried to translate what was said incorrectly. LOL, thanks for trying to teach this native speaker Spanish who freaking high school level C. Was confirmed to be another person who had quit the day it happened. Well, he's not here anymore, so since we can't blame him, we're blaming you. LOL, what? I didn't sign. I gave my 2 weeks and never looked back. When I was a door-to-door salesman for Verizon, I was able to sell a full TV, internet, phone package to a blind woman on a fixed income. I was training at the time and really needed a job, so there was a supervisor from the company to watch over and make sure I did everything right, but not interfere with my sales. I kept talking to the old woman about how good it would be for her grandchildren to have TV and internet in the home for when they visited. She agreed and signed for it, talking about how she'll just have to ask her daughter to help with coupons to afford it, but since it was for her grandkids it would be worth it. I walked out feeling awful about myself. I still feel terrible that I convinced a sweet old lady to buy my crappy service. I quit a week after that. I had this really rude butthole lady work in my office at my last job. She treated everyone like garbage because she was the assistant to the CEO. She threatened to quit multiple times to get more money and threw everyone around her under the bus to get attention. Suddenly about a year into me working there she is gone. Like no warning gone. I ask if I can clear her desk out and the CEO, now my boss, tells me to leave it intact. We just had hired our first HR person and I get a strange call from her. I'm the only IT guy for the whole company. HR. Hey Dask Thulhu. I have a strange question for you. Me. Yes. HR. Do you know how I can contact the events coordinator for the company? CEO wants me to start making team building events but I don't see her in communicator. Me. Wait. We have an events coordinator? Since when? HR. Well, I was working on payroll stuff and I noticed an employee, bitchy lady's name, as on our payroll so I figured I would give her a call. Turns out she left because she took a secret desk job from home and started making over 6 figures. No email account, no company phone, but somehow her corporate card was still active and she still showed up to all the company events to help set up. Still have no idea 100% what went down but I suspect blackmail was involved as we were cutting her a massive check every month. Someone sleeping with the boss. A nurse who would sign off on but not administer prescribed meds. She also wrote arbitrary numbers for blood sugar levels and would either skip insulin administration or just give a minimal amount. Facility would not take action until state did a review and said she had to go. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.